Hi, welcome back. And if you're new here, I'm Phil, the Ordinary Watch Guy. I'm perfectly ordinary, but the watches are always special. Today, I want to talk about the real cost of owning a watch. And let's try and bust the myth that Rolex is the only safe bet when it comes to value retention in a watch. This is a sensitive subject. Watch ownership isn't cheap, and we're all in a privileged position, particularly if we're in the market buying at luxury levels. I've owned many watches from a variety of brands, and I've never really taken a significant loss, touch wood, on a watch that I've owned. Part of that is because I'm cautious. I'm not taking on big pieces, extraordinary pieces that I can't afford. And I'm not taking risks flipping watches or speculating. But it also reflects that I'm realistic about how value works in this market. So stay with me, and towards the end of this video, I'm going to give you my little checklist of the things that I look at to help me avoid losing a bundle of money on a watch. So let's dig into it. Let's first of all have a look at a very recent example. I'm going to look at the Tudor Black Bay Chrono in pink. MSRP £5,020, but it's hard to get at that price. Chrono 24 listings are all above £8,000, and that £3,000 premium, well, that's the price of skipping the queue. It's a scarcity tax, if you like. When this model was first released, it was a big deal. Tudor said that it wasn't going to make this widely available, and the scarcity and the interest in the watch blew it up on the secondary market to £30,000. That didn't last. Once Tudor added it to the catalogue, the value crashed. People who paid the early inflated prices got burned hard. It was a low blow and a hard lesson for some people to learn. This shows how MSRP is really a number. Market value and cost is a different story entirely, and that's why I tell people don't pay full retail unless it's for Rolex for the time being, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, or a few very specific models like the Omega Snoopy, for example. Most of the watches will depreciate the moment you walk out of the door, and you certainly shouldn't expect them to appreciate. And hot take, I profoundly believe that we will get back to a place where people are buying Rolexes at less than MSRP. I think that's just a matter of time, honestly. And I think it's a matter of taste and fashion, and the wheel will turn. I was offered a Rolex Explorer 2 as a walk-in at the new Rolex boutique on New Bond Street only a couple of months ago. Things are changing, okay? That helps us to come on to the next subject, which is what I would call the Rolex myth. Okay, so there's a popular belief that Rolex is a guaranteed investment, but please don't treat watches as investments. Sure, some Rolex models do spike in value right after purchase, but actually buying one of those models at retail is about securing an allocation, and that's a different game altogether. Take the white dial stainless steel Rolex Daytona. Its MSRP is £13,600, but secondary market value is like £25,000 to £30,000. Think you're going to get one at retail? Well, not without spending at least the difference and probably a bit more, so £15,000 to £20,000 with the AD. And it's really not uncommon, that people pay more, and that's just to earn the allocation. So in reality, you're always likely to be paying more than the secondary value for that watch, in truth anyway, when you add it all up. And here's the thing. As a watch, and as good as the Daytona is, I'd argue that it's really not a £30,000 watch. And you can grab another chronograph like the Zenith Chronomaster Sport or the Omega Speedmaster, they'll deliver comparable quality and heritage for a third of that cost. Believe me when I tell you that there really isn't any Rolex pixie dust, okay? What I would say is that Rolex watches do hold up well when bought at MSRP, but that's not the whole story here. When it comes to other brands, you simply have to buy secondary and let someone else take the depreciation hit. Until recently, I owned an Omega Speedmaster Racing. I paid at a price where it had pretty much flatlined secondary. And, I owned it for about 3 years. It didn't appreciate in value at all. It didn't fall any further in value at all. And when I came to sell it, I pretty much sold it for what I paid for it. So that Amiga actually, it cost me nothing. I didn't even have to service it, honestly. So compare that to the Daytona example. If you spent £15,000 to £20,000 to get the allocation, and you spent £13,600 on the watch itself, you've actually spent as much as £33,600 to get that watch. There are plenty of people out there who've spent more. Is it still going to hold its value at that? In a couple of years, it'll be worth about £20,000 on the secondary market, and you will have dumped 100% of the value of the watch. To me, that's not an investment watch or something that is retaining value. I expect that will be seen as a hot take, but in my opinion, it's the truth. So let's have a look at what your watch is actually costing you. 2 years later, if you've bought a £5,000 watch and you sell it for £3,500, well, that 2 years has cost you £1,500, okay, for 2 years of enjoyment. And that seems pretty cool to me. Now imagine buying a £3,000 watch, keeping it in perfect condition and selling it for the same amount a year later. In my book, that watch didn't cost you a penny. And sure, some might say, okay, yeah, but that £3,000 could have been invested in this or that and it would have made you money. What you're talking about there is opportunity cost. And what we have to be realistic about is this is a watch. It's not a stock portfolio. It's not crypto. Don't compare your watches to that. Watches are not an investment. So here's my mental checklist, and here's how I evaluate what a watch is going to cost me realistically. I avoid hype watches, especially limited edition hype watches that carry huge premiums. If you buy during the hype under scarcity pressure, you're not paying for the watch, you're paying for the hype. Hype has zero value retention. These watches can lose that value so quickly. Additionally, buying from a boutique often means no discount whatsoever. ADs, they'll give you maybe 10 to 15% off depending on the brand, but that is not going to be enough to cover the depreciation of the watch when it leaves the store. Okay, boutique prices are typically the highest and most expensive. I promise you that it's the most expensive glass of champagne you ever tasted. Classic models, especially long-standing ones, are easier to track for value. They tend to stabilize and plateau, making value retention far more predictable, and you can figure out what you're happy with. So I tend to like slightly older watches myself. Rolex isn't magic. Okay, yes, it's likely to hold value better than most when bought correctly, but the myth of scoring a Daytona or a Pepsi at retail on a walk-in is a myth. Rolex comes with hidden costs when you factor in what it takes to secure an allocation or buy in the grey market. You don't get a walk-in Pepsi or a Daytona. You don't. The real cost of a watch is found in what you sell it for. So if you buy at 3,000 and you sell at 2.5, that's £500 for however long you owned it and enjoyed it. That's the real amount of money that you have paid to have that ownership and that enjoyment. Don't chase the cheapest watches up front. £500 watches will depreciate harder than one watch that costs you £2,500. Sometimes the most affordable watches are worth nothing or next to nothing in resale value almost instantly, meaning that they cost you more in the long term than a more expensive but stable piece. And don't forget to factor in the servicing costs, particularly if you're going to get a classic watch or, an antique watch. They're not joking, particularly on watches with complications and with chronographs. And finally, never overextend yourself to buy a watch. That will make you miserable, okay? Be realistic about what you can afford and make sure you stick to a budget. I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you evaluate the cost of owning a watch, and what do you think I've missed in my advice? What are your golden rules that you won't break? Drop a comment and I'll be delighted to reply to everyone. It'd be nice to accumulate some of that sage wisdom below a video of this nature. If you found this helpful, help me to grow the channel. Hit like and subscribe. It's the best way that you can thank me if you've appreciated the video. I'll be back with my next video on the Union Glashütte Belisar chronograph, my latest purchase, and I'll have some more content to bring you from my Glashütte visit too. Until then, why not check out one of my previous videos? Enjoy your watches, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.